Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I don't know why I waited so long to say it, but I do know the moment it all hit me. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation or a burst of anger. No, it was quieter than that, like the snap of a twig underfoot in the middle of a quiet forest. The moment when everything suddenly felt too real to ignore anymore. It started with a simple dinner. Just a regular Thursday night. The kind where we'd eat our food and pretend everything was normal. For the past few months, I had been living in a fog. The life I thought I knew had started to blur around the edges, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. So I kept telling myself I was overreacting. I kept telling myself the late nights at work, the cryptic text messages, the way she'd lock her phone whenever I came into the room were nothing. Just the usual distractions of modern life. That night, though, it felt different. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like she always did, her eyes glued to the screen, her fingers tapping furiously. I wasn't in the mood to start a conversation. But something about her detachment, it wasn't just disinterest in me, it was avoidance, pulled at me. It was like I could feel the space between us growing, even though she was physically sitting just feet away. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I watched her for a moment, watching the way her eyes flickered down, avoiding mine. It wasn't like before. It wasn't just a routine habit. It was like she was avoiding something. It wasn't just her phone that kept her distracted. It was the air between us, thick with something I couldn't put my finger on, something I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Then she did something that made my stomach twist. She smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It wasn't the smile she used to give me when she was genuinely happy to see me. This was different. It was forced, thin. Her lips stretched into a smile, but there was nothing behind it. No warmth. No joy. Just a hollow curve. Everything okay? I asked, my voice strangely flat. She blinked at me, almost as if she hadn't heard me. Then she quickly cleared her throat. Yeah, just tired. Work and stuff, she replied, not looking up from her phone. I nodded slowly, pretending I didn't feel the rush of panic rising in my chest. But the truth was, I had never felt so alone sitting next to her. She thought I didn't notice. She thought I was blind to the way she was slipping away from me. She thought I was too naive to understand what was happening. But I saw it. I saw the small changes, the ones she thought I wouldn't catch. The way she'd laugh a little too loud when someone mentioned her colleague in passing. The way her stories didn't line up anymore. The way her eyes darted around the room when I asked where she'd been or who she was talking to. And the texts. Oh, the texts that I couldn't see but could feel like a shadow. Always lurking, always just beyond reach. But even then, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was blowing everything out of proportion. But that night, sitting across from her, it all became clear. I had been pretending. We had been pretending. And I couldn't do it anymore. Maura, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the weight of it was like an anchor. I didn't look at her as I said her name. I couldn't. Stop acting. We're done pretending. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She froze. Her fingers stilled on the phone. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me, that maybe I was wrong, that I had imagined it. But then, she did the one thing that shattered any remaining doubt. She looked up at me, and in that instant, I saw it. I saw the panic in her eyes, the terror of being exposed, the fear of losing control. She didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't have to. Her eyes spoke volumes. The silence between us was thick, suffocating, as if she was trying to figure out what to say next, trying to piece together a story that would explain everything away. But there was no story. No excuse that could fix what had already broken. Then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely audible, trembling, as if she knew she had already lost. Don't leave. The words were simple, but they hit me harder than anything I had ever heard from her. The desperation in her voice, the way she clung to those 3 words, like they were the only thing left tethering her to me, to our life together. And that's when I realized. She wasn't just afraid of me leaving. She was afraid of the life she had built, of the lies she had been living. She was afraid of facing the consequences of everything she had done. I wasn't the one she was worried about losing. It was the perfect image of us that she was terrified of shattering. I stood up from the table, my heart hammering in my chest. Every inch of me wanted to turn around and walk out that door. But I couldn't. Not yet. I couldn't leave without hearing it all, even though I knew it would destroy me. I already know, Mora, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of my own emotions. I know what you've been doing. The lies, the secrets. I've seen it all. Her face drained of color. The woman I had married, the woman who once seemed so certain of everything, looked small and fragile now, as if the weight of my words had physically collapsed her. She didn't respond. She couldn't. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all the years, this was where we ended up. She still whispered those 3 words, "Don't leave," as if saying them could somehow undo the damage. But I knew then. I knew that we were both done pretending. The silence that followed her whispered plea hung in the air like thick fog. I didn't move, didn't say anything at first. It was as if time had stopped, and in that moment, I could feel the weight of everything she had been hiding. I had thought I knew her. But now, in the aftermath of her words, I realized I never really did. Her voice trembled as she repeated herself, more desperate now. "Please, don't leave. I can explain. I never meant for it to go this far." I wasn't sure if it was pity or anger that coursed through my veins. I wasn't sure of anything at that point, except that everything I thought I knew was a lie. For years, I had trusted her, believed in her. We built our lives together. But all of that came crashing down with those few simple words she had whispered. I wasn't sure how long we had been pretending, how much of it was real and how much was just a performance for my benefit. But now I was certain. I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. I took a deep breath, fighting the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "Don't bother with the explanations, Mora. You've been lying to me for months. I saw the way you've been acting, hiding your phone, leaving early, staying out late. I didn't want to believe it, but now I know." Her eyes darted to the floor, her shoulders sagging as if the last bit of strength had drained from her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she muttered, almost to herself. "Like what?" I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "Like you were supposed to keep playing the part of the perfect wife? Like you were going to keep pretending we were fine? Is that it?" She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I thought I saw something resembling guilt flash across her face. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Well, you did a hell of a job at that, didn't you?" The irony of it all hit me. She thought she had been fooling me. She thought I couldn't see through her act. But I wasn't blind. I had just refused to acknowledge the truth. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't filled with the tension of uncertainty. This was something else. This was the quiet of 2 people who had stopped pretending. I took a step back, away from the table, as if putting distance between us could somehow make everything clearer. "So who is he?" I asked, my voice steady now, almost too steady. She froze. Her face went pale, and I saw her hands tremble slightly. "What?" she stammered, unable to meet my eyes. "The man you've been seeing behind my back?" I said coldly. "Who is he?" It wasn't a question I wanted to ask, but I knew I had to. I needed to know. I needed to hear her admit it, even if it would break me. She bit her lip, her eyes filled with something close to regret. I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Mora, I saw the way you were looking at him. The way you'd light up when his name came up. You think I didn't notice?" She shook her head, her face crumpling as if the weight of her lies was finally too much to bear. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words falling from her lips like they were never meant to be spoken. "I never meant for you to find out like this." But I had already found out, and the realization hit harder than anything she could say now. "You never meant for me to find out?" I echoed, disbelief thick in my voice. "What, Mora? What exactly did you mean? You thought you could just keep doing this? Lie to my face every day, and I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't eventually figure it out?" Her hands were shaking now, and she slowly stood up, closing the gap between us. "Please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was just lost. I didn't know how to stop." I looked at her, trying to find any trace of the woman I had once loved. But all I saw now was a stranger, someone who had become so caught up in their own lies that they had forgotten who they were. Forgotten who we were. The room was suffocating, the air too thick to breathe. She stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought she was going to reach out for me. But I stepped back, my chest tight. "No, Mora," I said firmly, shaking my head. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending like I'm okay with this. I can't trust you anymore. Her face crumpled then, tears welling up in her eyes as she reached out toward me. Please, don't leave. Please. Her voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it stop, to go back to when things were simpler. But I couldn't. The damage was done. I wasn't sure if I was still capable of love in this moment. I wasn't sure if I even knew what love was anymore. I turned away and walked toward the door, my heart heavy, knowing that when I left that room, things would never be the same. I could feel her eyes on my back as I walked toward the door, the silence between us thick with regret. I paused for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, and turned around to face her. The tears in her eyes were the only sign she wasn't completely numb, but even that seemed rehearsed. Maybe I had been blind all this time, but now, I saw her for what she was, a woman caught in the tangled web of her own deceit. You know, I said quietly, my voice strangely calm despite the storm raging inside of me. When I first suspected something, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself you'd never do something like this. She didn't say anything, just stood there, her hands trembling by her sides. I could see her fighting the urge to explain herself, but it was too late for that. Words weren't going to fix this. I walked back into the room, closing the distance between us. You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? I said, almost more to myself than to her. You thought you could keep living this double life, smiling in my face and lying through your teeth, and I wouldn't catch on. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she just shook her head slowly, as if accepting some unspoken truth. I could tell she wasn't expecting this. She wasn't expecting me to finally see through the illusion. The tension in the room was unbearable. I had never felt so far away from her, so disconnected from the woman I thought I knew. Who is he, Mora? I asked again, my voice breaking the silence. She closed her eyes, like she was trying to hold back the truth, like she wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the cracks in her facade, tiny fissures in the perfect image she had worked so hard to create. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said softly, almost apologetically. It just happened. Her words cut deeper than I expected. It just happened. I echoed, incredulous. That's your explanation? You're telling me you accidentally fell into another man's arms? You're telling me this wasn't a choice? She flinched, her breath catching in her throat. No, it wasn't like that. I stared at her, trying to read the expression on her face. But all I saw was a woman who had become a stranger to me. Then what was it like, Mora? I demanded, my patience worn thin. Tell me the truth. I need to know everything. She hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Then, in a voice so small, so fragile, she spoke. It wasn't about him. It was about something I lost in myself. Something I've been trying to find for months. I didn't understand. It felt like she was speaking in riddles, offering me half-truths wrapped in a veil of vague excuses. What are you talking about? I asked, my frustration bubbling to the surface. I don't know, she whispered, the tears finally falling freely from her eyes. I thought I was doing fine, that I could handle everything. But I couldn't. I needed something, and I got lost along the way. The words hung in the air between us, hanging by a thread. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered now, and I wasn't sure if I could put them back together, even if I tried. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to listen to her explanations anymore. I just wanted the truth. The cold, hard truth. I stepped closer to her, and for a moment, I almost reached out. Almost tried to comfort her, to make everything better. But then I remembered what she had done. What she had chosen to do. You wanted more, didn't you? I said quietly, almost as if I were speaking to myself. You wanted something I couldn't give you. That's why you did it. You were never satisfied with what we had. Her gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders slumping in defeat. It wasn't like that, she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction now. Then what was it like? I asked again, though I already knew the answer. She didn't respond. And that silence, the weight of it, told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about being unsatisfied or needing more. It was about the lies, the deception, the betrayal. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. And now, standing here in this broken silence, I realized how little that trust meant to her. I stepped back, the door still open behind me, but I didn't look back this time. I think we're done here, I said, my voice low, final. Her whisper followed me as I turned away. Please, don't leave. But this time, I didn't hesitate. This time, I walked out. I could hear her soft sobs in the background as I walked out the door, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Not anymore. Every part of me felt like it had been torn apart, but there was a cold clarity that settled in my chest. I had been living a lie for so long. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay. As I stepped into the hallway, my mind started racing. The images of her, of us, flashed through my head, each one now tainted with the realization that nothing between us had been real. I had trusted her, loved her, and she had shattered that trust with every lie, every secret. I went to the living room and collapsed onto the couch. My head was spinning. Part of me wanted to call her out, to demand more answers, but another part of me knew there was nothing left to say. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no going back. I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind. Please, don't leave. How could she ask that? After everything? How could she possibly think I could stay after all the lies she had fed me? The door creaked open behind me, and I didn't need to look up to know it was her. I could feel her presence, the same way I always had, like an invisible weight pressing down on me. She hesitated at the threshold, as if waiting for me to speak, but I remained silent. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't respond. What was there to say? The apology felt empty, meaningless. I've made so many mistakes, she continued, walking slowly toward me. But you have to believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that her words meant nothing now. But I just couldn't. I had been reduced to a shell of myself, an empty version of the man I used to be. Why? I finally asked, my voice cracking. Why did you do it? Why did you lie to me? She stood there, looking at the floor, unable to answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I don't know, she whispered finally. I got caught up in something I couldn't control. I didn't know how to stop. I shook my head, the tears threatening to spill, but I fought them back. I'm done, I thought. I'm done. You don't get to say that, I said, my voice low and harsh. You don't get to pretend you were helpless. You chose this. You chose to lie. You chose to keep me in the dark. Her face crumpled at my words, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine regret in her eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she was pleading for forgiveness. But the truth was, the hurt had already been done. There was nothing left to fix. I think you should leave, I said, standing up and walking past her, my hand firmly on the door. Her eyes widened in shock, and she reached out for me, but I pulled the door open before she could get close. She stood there, in the doorway, frozen. Her tears were streaming down her face now, her body trembling. Please, she whispered. Don't go. But I was already gone. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and as I walked out into the night, I knew that the world I had once known had ended. And there was no turning back. I stepped out into the cool night, the door shutting behind me with a finality that seemed to echo in my chest. My mind was a whirlwind, trying to process everything that had just unfolded. It felt like a bad dream, like I was watching it all from the outside, unable to do anything but endure it. I kept walking, not sure where I was going or what I was looking for, but needing to get as far away from that house, from her, as I could. The streets were quiet, the usual hum of life muted by the weight of what I had just learned. I had spent years building a life with her, a life I had thought was real. But it wasn't. It was all a facade. And for the first time in my life, I realized how much of myself I had given away to someone else, how much I had been willing to ignore in order to keep the illusion alive. As I walked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be her, apologizing again or begging me to come back. But it wasn't. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. She never loved you, the message read. She was never really yours. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. Who would send me something like that? And why? I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it, but nothing made sense anymore. The message was followed by another one. Her heart's already gone. She's been seeing him for months. You were just the backup plan. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My heart was pounding in my chest, the blood rushing to my head as the truth settled in. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It wasn't just some random slip-up. She had been with someone else for months. I had been a fool, living in a false reality. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship was shattered in an instant. I stood there in the middle of the street, not knowing what to do next. I wanted to call her, to confront her again, to demand answers. But a part of me knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made her choice. The lies were too deep, and I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. Not after this. The phone buzzed again. Another message. I can give you what she never could. She'll leave you for him. Just wait and see. My hands were shaking now, the weight of the messages pressing down on me. I didn't know who was sending them, but it didn't matter. The truth was out there, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to stay in the place where every corner reminded me of the woman who had betrayed me. I needed to leave, to find something to distract me from the pain. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows on the pavement as I turned and started walking again, not caring where I was going. Only that I was moving away from it all. But as I walked, a thought nagged at the back of my mind. What if this was the end of everything? What if I was never going to be able to put the pieces of my life back together? What if I was just too broken to fix? I had no answers, just more questions, and the overwhelming feeling that everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers like sand. The world felt colder now, emptier. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe I had been fooling myself all along. Because no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the truth was that she had never been mine to begin with. The night air felt cold, but it wasn't the kind of chill that made you shiver. It was a deeper cold, the kind that sinks into your bones and refuses to leave. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I needed to keep walking, to keep moving. The streets stretched out before me like a labyrinth, but each turn felt like it was pulling me further from the life I thought I knew. The messages still buzzed on my phone, but I didn't dare look at them. I couldn't. My mind was too full of everything that had happened, of the lies, the betrayals, and the raw truth that had been shoved in my face. I wanted to scream, to break something, but there was nothing to break. No place left to go. It was as if I had been emptied out, hollowed out by everything Maura had done. And yet, there was something else. Something I couldn't escape. It was that damn whisper of hers, "Don't leave." It kept echoing in my mind, over and over again. She had said it with such desperation, as if she thought those 3 words could fix everything. As if she thought she could reverse the damage, erase the betrayal. But the truth was, I had already left. Mentally, emotionally, I was already gone. The woman I had loved was a stranger now, and I couldn't look at her the same way again. I stopped walking, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, unsure of what to do next. The night felt heavier now, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't carry. I pulled out my phone, hesitated for a moment, and then opened the last message again. "You don't deserve this," it read. "You're better off without her." I couldn't tell if it was someone trying to stir the pot, or if they were genuinely trying to help, but the words hit hard. Better off without her? Was I? After everything, could I really walk away and find peace? Or would I always carry the burden of what she had done? The thought gnawed at me. It was the hardest decision I had ever faced. I had been living in a fog, waiting for things to return to normal, but nothing ever would. No amount of apologies, no amount of promises could take back what she had done. And yet, as I stood there in the middle of the night, I realized I was still holding on to something inside me, some part of me that wasn't ready to give up. Maybe it was the years we had spent together, the life we had built. Or maybe it was the hope that, somewhere deep down, she was still the woman I had fallen in love with. But that hope was quickly fading, and with each passing minute, I was beginning to understand that it wasn't her I was holding on to. It was the idea of her. I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what was happening, didn't see what was right in front of me. The lies were too deep, the betrayal too raw. I had to make a choice. And the hardest part was realizing that, in the end, the choice wasn't about her. It was about me. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to hold on to something that was already broken. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was starting to see that maybe it was time to let go. With a deep breath, I turned away from the street and began walking toward the one place I hadn't dared go in the past few hours, back to my car. It was time to leave it all behind. It was time to take the first step toward healing, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. Because, in the end, I had only ever had myself. And that was the hardest part to accept. I didn't know how long I had been walking. The streets were still eerily quiet, the occasional car passing by like a distant memory. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. I had stopped caring about the messages. They weren't going to change anything. The lies, the deception, it was all too much. I reached my car, standing there for a moment before I slid into the driver's seat. The engine hummed to life, but it felt more like a whisper than a roar, a sign of things dying rather than coming alive. I rested my head against the steering wheel, my fingers gripping it so tightly I thought I might snap it in half. But the tension in my chest, the tightness in my throat, those things weren't going away. I stared out the windshield into the night. Everything felt out of place, like the world was shifting just beyond my reach. Everything I had thought I knew, every certainty I had held on to, was now a lie. Mora's voice echoed in my head again. Please, don't leave. I could almost hear her, feel her standing right behind me, begging for me to stay. But I couldn't. I had already left in my heart, in my mind. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to smooth over the cracks, to pretend the fractures weren't there. But in the end, those cracks had become chasms, and nothing I did could fill them. I took a deep breath and started driving, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. I wasn't sure what was worse, the silence in my car, or the thought of going back to that house, knowing it wasn't home anymore. The place I had shared with her, the place I had imagined was filled with love and trust, had become nothing more than a memory, a place full of lies. I couldn't shake the image of her face when I left, her eyes wide, pleading with me to stay. But it wasn't her I was leaving behind, was it? It was the person I had believed her to be, the woman I had loved, the one who, in the beginning, made me feel like I was everything. But that woman had never really existed, had she? She was just a version of her I had built in my mind, a version that had been shattered beyond recognition. The road stretched on, and I drove aimlessly, my thoughts a whirlwind. I knew I couldn't go back. I knew that, no matter what happened, nothing would ever be the same. Mora had broken the bond between us, and I had no idea how to rebuild it, or if it was even possible. Eventually, I found myself parked on the side of the road, the city lights a distant blur in my rearview mirror. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my fingers still gripping the steering wheel. What was I supposed to do now? Where could I go from here? I thought about calling someone, telling them everything. But who would I talk to? How could I explain the devastation I was feeling without sounding like I was drowning in self-pity? No one could understand. Not unless they had been where I was, felt the way I felt now, completely alone. It wasn't just about Mora anymore. It was about me, too. I had let myself fall into this relationship, into this life, where I thought everything was perfect. I had ignored the warning signs, overlooked the little things that didn't add up. And now, here I was, staring into the abyss, not knowing how to pull myself out. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the sound echoing in the empty night. The pain was real. The betrayal was real. But so was the anger. The anger that I had wasted so much of myself on someone who never really cared about me in the way I had believed. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over, hot and fast. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everything. Every moment I had let slip by without realizing the truth. Every moment I had sacrificed for a love that wasn't real. I wiped my eyes, trying to steady my breathing, trying to find some kind of clarity. But there was none. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't know what was next. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to her. I couldn't pretend anymore. The woman who had whispered, "Don't leave," wasn't the same woman I had fallen in love with. She was someone else now. A stranger. And as I started the car again and drove off into the night, I realized that the hardest part wasn't walking away. It was accepting that I had already left a long time ago. The drive stretched on for what felt like hours, but the farther I went, the more the weight on my chest lifted. My thoughts started to settle, the storm of anger and confusion slowly turning into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living for someone else's version of my life. I had given so much to Mora, so much of myself, that I had forgotten who I was, forgotten what I truly needed. As the car rolled down the darkened highway, I realized something important. I had let her take so much from me, my trust, my heart, my peace, but I hadn't lost everything. I still had my will to fight. I still had my future to look forward to. And that realization, it gave me a kind of power I hadn't felt in years. I pulled off the highway and parked in front of a small, quiet lake. It was a place I used to visit when I needed to think, a place where the world felt far away, where I could hear myself again. I sat in the car for a long while, just staring out at the water, letting the peacefulness settle over me. I wasn't sure what was next, but I knew one thing. I was done with the past. I was done with the lies. It was time to move forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Weeks went by, and I focused on rebuilding myself. I changed my routine, spent more time doing things I had long neglected. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, and even started therapy to help sort through the mess of emotions I had buried for too long. Each day felt like a small victory. Slowly but surely, I started to feel whole again. And then one day, out of nowhere, I received a message from a mutual friend who had stayed in contact with Maura. The message was short, but the weight of it was undeniable. Maura's seeing someone new. He's the one she left you for. At first, I felt a flicker of anger, but it was quickly replaced with something else, indifference. Her actions no longer had the power to hurt me. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. But there was something else in the message. A small detail that made me smile to myself. The man she had left me for? Turns out, he wasn't exactly the knight in shining armor she had hoped for. He had a past, and not the kind of past that fit into the fairy tale she had wanted. Within a few months, their relationship had already started to crumble. The same patterns, the same lies. And I knew, deep down, that she was getting a taste of her own medicine. It wasn't karma in the way I had originally envisioned. It wasn't the kind of revenge where you watch someone suffer in the same way you did. No, it was different. It was the quiet, steady march of consequences. She had made her choices, and now she was living with them. As for me, I was finally free. The weight of her betrayal had been heavy, but the freedom that came after it was like a breath of fresh air. I wasn't bitter. I didn't need her to suffer. I just needed to be done. A few months later, I found myself in a new city, starting a new chapter of my life. I had rebuilt my confidence, rediscovered my passions, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared. I was no longer defined by the woman who had betrayed me. I was finally, truly, living for myself. And as I sat at a cafe one afternoon, my phone buzzing with a message from a friend, I read the words, "Maura is trying to get in touch with you again. She wants to apologize." I smiled and put the phone down. I didn't need her apology. I had forgiven her a long time ago. It was time for me to keep moving forward, to continue embracing the life I deserved. And as for her, she would figure it out, just as I had. But I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the man who had been willing to give away everything for a lie. I was someone new, someone stronger. For the first time in my life, I was truly at peace. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.